Until recently, the studios carefully guarded all information about dubbing. Of all aspects of filmmaking, this is perhaps the one most shrouded in mystery. By the conclusion of 1952's Singing in the Rain, Lena Lamont, the talentless, shrill-voiced movie diva, is seen as nothing but a joke, if not an antagonist. Fortunately, at the film's climax, Kathy Selden, who is the talented but underappreciated singing voice of Lena, gets her happy ending. Kathy's identity is revealed, Lena Lamont's lack of talent is exposed to the audience, and hilarity ensues. Singin' in the Rain might have been critiquing the secrecy that Hollywood adopted to maintain a star persona, but the movie is nothing but hypocritical. According to the book, Singin' in the Rain, The Making of American Masterpiece, in reality, Debbie Reynolds was deemed to have an unsatisfactory voice, and she herself was dubbed in 2 of the movie's numbers by Betty Noyes. These numbers were Would You and the You Are My Lucky Star duet. That being said, Debbie Reynolds did sing Good Morning and Singin' in the Rain. There is a rumor that Gene Hagen did the singing dub, but this is false. In case you are unaware, vocal dubbing is when an actor's voice is replaced by an unseen other, often referred to as a ghost singer, who would go uncredited. The underappreciated ghost singers that Kathy represented and the audience cheered for were hidden from public knowledge in most Hollywood films. Hollywood preferred to craft stars and then laugh at itself before cashing in a big check. We laugh at Lena Lamont in the movie for being revealed as a fraud, but especially at the time of Singin' in the Rain's debut, vocal dubbing was a common practice. But this isn't a bad thing, and I'll tell you why. Hello there. Welcome to Movie Musical Mania, the channel devoted to sharing a slice of musical cinema with the world. Please like and subscribe for more content like this. Today we uncover the secret history of vocal dubbing in Hollywood, and how the shift towards authenticity might indicate a disconnect between audience and the filmmaker. I would like to say that this history is by no means exhaustive, and my conclusions are exactly that. My conclusions. Anyway, let's get into it. With the emergence of sound pictures in the late 1920s, 3 standard practices began for recording musical numbers. Playback, where an actor mouthed along to pre-recorded music; dubbing, where another singer's voice was added over in post-production; and voice doubling, where another singer would be present on set and sing as the actor mouthed along, sometimes even with a live orchestra. All successfully crafted a star persona, the illusion that the body on the screen was producing the beautiful voice. It was more than common for silent stars to need a vocal dub when transitioning into talkies. While studios could always cast a singer to play a musical part, what were they supposed to do with their dramatic and conventionally attractive actors who couldn't hold a tune? After all, it was important to keep up the appearance that the attractive body was making the attractive sound. Miles Kruger writes that dubbing dates back to 1927's The Jazz Singer. Although prominent stage singer Al Jolson naturally did his own singing in The Jazz Singer, both Bobby Gordon, who played Jolson as a boy, and Warner Oland, as his father, were dubbed. Since so many of the first talkies had a musical element to show off the new technology, it seemed that no actor was spared. Richard Barthelmess was dubbed in Weary River by Johnny Murray. Laura LaPlante was dubbed by Ava Olavote in Showboat, 1929. And Greta Garbo, who was playing an opera diva in Romance, was dubbed by Tina Paggi, a high soprano, which did not match Garbo's low register. Vocal dubbing was not exclusively for replacing the singing voice either. Paul Lucas's speaking voice, which had a thick Hungarian accent, was dubbed over by Lawford Davidson. Movie studios denied claims that their actors weren't doing their own singing. This presented an issue of authenticity. The films marketed themselves around singing stars, but what if the stars weren't actually doing their own singing? Song performances raised the stakes of authenticity because it required special skills. So, how did audiences respond to vocal dubbing at first? I mentioned before that Richard Barthelmess was dubbed in Weary River, but I didn't say that it was truly one of the first scandals related to vocal dubbing, if you can call it that. To say it caused much discourse among moviegoers is an understatement. Leading up to the release of the picture, Barthelmess had even invited audiences to hear him sing in this new production. After the film's release, speculation of a vocal dub festered among the public. Spring writes in To Sustain Illusion is All That Is Necessary, an interesting account of the aftermath. A committee of local musicians was appointed to analyze and assess the matching of Barthelmess's physical performance with the sonic qualities of the voice on the soundtrack. Meanwhile, the film's release at the Metropolitan Theater in Houston generated similar rumors, and another committee of musicians was coordinated there. The committee's studies yielded different opinions. Some insisted it was the star's voice they heard on the soundtrack, but others were more skeptical. One member quipped, If Barthelmess actually does sing, he should be in the Smithsonian Institute. The intensity of breathing so essential in singing is entirely lacking. And another noted, Barthelmess moves his lips with no movement at all in his throat. But even committee members who declared the singing fake observed that it was so well done it did not detract from the picture's appeal. Various attitudes developed, only one of which was admonishing of Barthelmess and/or First National. A columnist of the Louisville Times warned, "If Barthelmess doesn't sing Weary River, then I, for one, will never trust the screen again unless it features someone like Al Jolson, who has already been proved and found not wanting." A number of fans were equally perturbed. Jean Betty Huber of Morris Plains, New Jersey, submitted this letter to the editor of Picture Play magazine. "Please listen, you movie folk. We bow in homage to your beauty and acting ability. We pay hard-earned money to see your pictures, and now to hear you speak as well. You who have our complete admiration and support. Where would you be without it? Now tell me that. If these little Dick Barthelmess stunts are to continue, then here's one fan who is giving you a fond farewell." Photoplay released an article in 1929 titled "The Truth About Voice Doubling," which acted as a tell-all about the practice. Here are all the facts about sound doubling and how it is done. The bulk of the article was devoted to revealing the fact that the Weary River star was indeed dubbed. Despite a few complaints, the public generally accepted it as another trickery of filmmaking akin to stuntmen and makeup. Only a girl of 15 from Branford, Connecticut stated, "I think that he ought to be given credit for fooling everyone as he did in Weary River. In my opinion, it would be harder to have a double than to do the work itself." And reviewer Stanley Orne asserted, "In the matter of voice doubling in the movies, there can be only one crime, the crime of being detected in your voice doubling. The creed of the dumb movie player might well be, 'Let not thy public know what thy voice double doeth.'" Orne then questioned why audiences would complain about doublers when they absolve filmmakers for other trickery. "It is well known that the clothes which seem white in the pictures actually are yellow in the Hollywood studios, that daredevils risk their lives to spare the necks of handsome men who get screen credit for bravery, that the movie magazines are stuffed with stories written by journalists but signed with the names of actors and actresses who can't write 10 consecutive words sensibly. Why then should we be squeamish over the voice doubling fraud? Frankly, I'm not." Hollywood had emerged unscathed from the Weary River scandal and now hired a host of ghost singers in the 1930s, including Diana Galen for Virginia Bruce in The Mighty Barnum and Olivia de Havilland in Anthony Adverse, Betty Heistand for June Lang and James O'Brien for Douglas Montgomery in Music in the Air, James Newell for Ross Alexander in Ready, Willing, and Able, and Mary Martin, still undiscovered, for Margaret Sullivan in The Shop-Worn Angel. In the 1940s, success with the practice led to more frequent dubbing. Luann Hogan sang for Jean Crane in both State Fair and Centennial Summer. Bonnie Lou Williams was a frequent singer for Virginia Mayo. Even the talented Angela Lansbury was dubbed in some films, including The Portrait of Dorian Gray. Rita Hayworth was assisted by several different ghost singers over her career, such as Nan Wynn in My Gal Sal, You Never Were Lovelier, and CoverGirl, Anita Ellis in Gilda, Down to Earth, The Lady from Shanghai, The Loves of Carmen, and Joanne Greer in Affair in Trinidad, Miss Sadie Thompson, and Pal Joey. Martha Mears sang for Hayworth in Tonight and Every Night, Lucille Ball in The Big Street, and Dewberry Was a Lady, and Marjorie Reynolds in Holiday Inn. According to Classic Movie Hub blog, Martha Mears had as many as 38 movie credits to her name. While studios would try to keep vocal dubbing under wraps, it didn't always stay that way. Miles Kruger writes that, in 1935, Jean Harlow, not afraid of public dismissal, admitted publicly that she had been dubbed by radio singer Virginia Verrill in the musical Reckless. With the advent of soundtrack albums during the 1940s, MGM Records in particular began to identify the names of the persons on the discs, regardless of the face on the screen. It was revealed that Anita Ellis sang for Vera Ellen in Three Little Words and The Bells of New York, and for Jean Crane in Gentlemen Marry Brunettes. Carol Richards was given record label credit for having dubbed Vera Ellen in Call Me Madam, for Sid Charisse in Brigadoon and Silk Stockings, and for Betta St. John in The Robe. Audiences were gleefully fed the wonderful, glitzy, perfect illusion that Hollywood offered. Especially in those days, the studios controlled what people watched. Although, in fairness, box office receipts also decreed what kind of movies would be made, which gave audiences at least a little autonomy. Studio decisions were driven by star power. According to James McMahon's 2024 study Star Power and Risk, a political economic study of casting trends in Hollywood, movie stars during the studio era had a high repetition rate, meaning that movie studios relied heavily on the star's name to produce hundreds of films within a short time frame. By the 1950s and 1960s, writes Kruger, vocal dubbing was so frequent that this aspect of film production had come to be regarded as a special craft, like lighting, makeup, and cinematography. Consider 1958's South Pacific. Of the main players, only Mitzi Gaynor did her own singing. 20th Century Fox had advertised that Giorgio Tozzi sang for actor Rossano Brazzi, but the studio hid that John Kerr was dubbed by Bill Lee, and Juanita Hall, the original Bloody Mary on Broadway, was dubbed by Muriel Smith, who had played the role in London. Interestingly enough, Juanita Hall was not dubbed in her other Rodgers and Hammerstein film Flower Drum Song, which, by the way, dubbed Nancy Kwan and other cast members. You probably know Marni Nixon, the voice of Margaret O'Brien in The Secret Garden, Marilyn Monroe for parts of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Natalie Wood in West Side Story, and Deborah Carr in The King and I. She rose to prominence when Deborah Carr announced publicly that she had been dubbed in The King and I. I would like to note that Miss Carr said they split the vocal parts, but the finished product is nearly all Miss Nixon. Marni Nixon is important to the history, but there are several other prolific dubbers. Betty Wan sang for Leslie Caron in Gigi, some of the parts for Rita Moreno in West Side Story, Shirley Temple, and Esther Williams. In addition to his work on South Pacific, Bill Lee dubbed Christopher Plummer in The Sound of Music, Matt Maddox in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, Cary Grant in Father Goose, Bill Reeve in Westward Ho! The Wagons, as well as other pictures. And I've already discussed prolific dubbers such as Carol Richards and Martha Mears. Okay, enough with the names already. Am I getting to a point? Yes, I am. Back to Marni Nixon, who dubbed Audrey Hepburn singing in 1964's My Fair Lady. This would result in probably the second critical scandal around vocal dubbing. The story is infamous among musical fans, but the short of it is this. Julie Andrews, who had played the role on Broadway, had been rejected by Warner Brothers for the star power of Hepburn. She received much bad press as the public was on Andrews' side, and while the film was released to glowing reviews, Hepburn was lambasted for stealing Andrews' part and having her voice dubbed. Nixon stepped forward publicly and announced her role as a ghost singer, and the public felt that Jack Warner had tried to deceive them. Hepburn did not receive an Oscar nomination despite the film's 12 other nominations, and Andrews ended up taking home the Oscar for Mary Poppins. Interestingly, Jeremy Brett was also dubbed in My Fair Lady by Bill Shirley, but there was no negative response to this. Audiences weren't necessarily upset about the dub. I mean, Deborah Carr received little to no critical backlash for her very public admittance of vocal dubbing by the same Miss Nixon. They were upset that Andrews had the part stolen from her, and the need for a vocal dub was just an insult to injury. After this, dubbing slowly decreased as a practice. But I don't think this is as much a response to the My Fair Lady backlash as it is a response to the decline of musicals as a genre altogether. I mean, dubbing still continued. In 1969's Paint Your Wagon, Gene Seberg was dubbed by Anita Gordon, and Marian McAndrew was dubbed in 1969's Hello Dolly by Melissa Stafford and Gilda Macon. And yet, if the practice was still happening, I just gotta wonder, why didn't they dub Lucille Ball in Mame? I mean, the same actress had been dubbed 30 years prior. After musicals became a less commercially viable genre, they were free to represent more social conflicts around sex, gender, war, social unrest, and drug use. These musicals, often dark and disturbing in nature, shed the glossy look of previous movies. This period led to a greater casting of non-singers who were not dubbed. According to Kessler in her book Destabilizing the Hollywood Musical, these casting choices pull the performance away from a utopian fantasy. Sometimes in these films, the main character singing was already an established singer outside of the film, and so the music relied on selling an authentic performance, like Barbra Streisand in A Star is Born, Olivia Newton-John in Xanadu, and Dolly Parton in The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. Musicals such as Jesus Christ Superstar and Tommy fought the norm by introducing rock music and, according to Kessler, shrieking vocals to present a sound that disrupts the safety and calm once implicit in the musical narrative. After this era, musicals all but disappeared outside of animated movies. So, where are we today? Not too long ago, Rebecca Ferguson was dubbed in The Greatest Showman by a singer named Lauren Allred. Recently, I was talking to a person I know about this, and they lowered their voice and said, almost in a whisper, "Did you know she was dubbed?" And I thought to myself, why is this such a scandal? We know stuntmen and CGI and makeup exist. Why is this where we draw the line? When filmmakers returned to the genre in the 21st century, musicals had to apologize for being musicals. The star-studded cast of Mamma Mia did each of their own singing, to general grumblings from the public, especially in regards to Pierce Brosnan, as did the cast of Phantom of the Opera. A review by critic Tim Brayton reads, in regards to Phantom's singing, "It is mind-blowingly bad. It competes only with Pierce Brosnan's cow-giving birth performance of SOS and Mamma Mia for the title of worst vocal performance in a musical of the 2000s. The answer to why these movies have bad singing is clear. Movies still rely on star power to sell films, despite a star's frequency dropping and independent filmmaking having more of a platform than ever. These performances, whether disliked by audiences or not, are seen by filmmakers as being more authentic. They sell a complete performance, imperfect voice and all." And then came Tom freaking Hooper, who decided it was a good idea to make even good singers sound bad and push the limits further. In 2012, Hooper's film adaptation of Les Mis shook things up within the industry. The actors sang live, which had not been practiced outside of the first sound films and My Fair Lady. Hepburn had been dubbed, but Rex Harrison, the male lead, demanded that he sing his songs live, so a microphone was hidden in his tie. Up until then, actors would shoot a scene while mouthing along to a playback or a pre-recording. Hooper felt that live singing helped establish an authentic world. "I think the central challenge, is you're creating an alternate reality where people communicate through song. But you have to make this reality utterly convincing or all is lost," Hooper said in a 2012 interview with NPR. Unfortunately, this resulted in a horrible rendering of the score. At least in my opinion. This technique of recording an actor singing live on set was also used in 2019's Cats and 2024's Wicked. John M. Chu, the director of Wicked, said this helped add a level of realism to the Land of Oz. The current desire for filmmakers to find realism in movie musicals is strange, considering how much fantasy the genre requires to work. I mean, do you know anyone who likes movie musicals who's asking for a more realistic musical? I don't. The denial of realism is, perhaps, the greatest benefit of classic musicals. Highly fabricated and polished musicals of the 1940s, such as Meet Me in St. Louis, On the Town, and Easter Parade, provided escapism to audiences just leaving World War II. I find that today's musicals, with some exceptions, don't resonate as well with audiences, who largely complain about vocal performances. You may say, cast actors who can sing. And I agree with you, it worked for Hairspray and Wicked, but remember, the movie business relies on star power, and genuinely asking, how many stars are triple threats? Consider Steven Spielberg's 2021 adaptation of West Side Story, which cast largely unknown but skilled vocalists in the lead roles. According to TheNumbers.com, with a budget of $100 million, the film only recouped $40 million. The 1961 film adaptation of the same musical made $47 million on a $6 million budget, with a dubbed Natalie Wood in the lead. Similarly, In the Heights and Dear Evan Hansen also failed to recoup their investments. There are many reasons these film adaptations might have failed in the box office, of course, including Ben Platt's uncanny and unconvincing look as a teenager. I say, cast singers, but if someone is right for the role and can't hold a tune, dub them. Or if a name is needed to get a project off the ground, dub them, just as a reviewer wrote in the Louisville Courier of Kentucky at the time of the Weary River scandal. Barthelmess gives the illusion that he sings admirably, and that is all that is necessary. To sustain illusion is all that is necessary. I believe that trends in vocal dubbing in Hollywood show a disconnect from audiences and the filmmaker. With the disenchantment and the false utopias that classic movie musicals created, modern filmmakers tend to opt for an actor to do their own singing, regardless of audience's opinion. And this industry shift did not happen overnight. A fascination with reflecting current issues replaced the once utopic musicals in the 1970s before the genre altogether disappeared in the 1980s. The audience's perception of the star also shifted. It is true that audiences always want to see familiar faces on the screen, but audiences of the modern day seem to reject the perfectly crafted star persona that kept studios afloat 70 years ago. Consider, for example, tell-all magazines and talk shows, not to mention a celebrity social media page. Cancel culture has replaced careful PR crafting. There are, of course, other historical contexts to take in account when explaining the shift to authenticity, and these, admittedly, I fail to address. What does vocal dubbing in Hollywood say about American culture? What are the accepted levels of illusion and deception as compared to realism? Should modern filmmakers continue to cast non-singers in their musical dystopias without dubbing them, they will find themselves further and further from the cohesive, utopic musicals that once worked so well. Thanks for watching. This is Movie Musical Mania. please like and subscribe for more content like this.